Good morning. It is 6:10 in the morning on November 19th, Saturday. My name is Larry Cedar. I'm back with you for another session on scanning, spelled Sqanning. Scanning references the word scanning, as in scanning your body, but use a cue just to kind of make it a little different to indicate that it's a technique. It's a relaxation technique. So today I'm just going to jump right in. I'm not going to give much of a description of the technique. We're just going to practice the technique. We're going to try to squeeze out every minute of this half hour to practice the technique. And again, all scanning is basically moving into a more expanded state. In the universe, you are either contracting or expanding. We tend to be overly contracted, which makes us unhappy. We want to balance our life, bring ourselves from a more contracted state into a more expanded state until we are centered. We use the muscles, the incremental release of muscular tension, to guide us into that state. Muscles can either contract or expand, relax. So by moving the musculature into a more expanded state, we basically infuse our very being with expansion, which in turn affects our mind, which allows our mind to expand, and like a muscle which holds on to thoughts, let them go, let them drift away, until you're in a state of emptiness, calm, stillness, quiet, and peace. So that's the intent. So we're just going to start today. We're not going to make much more of it than that. Start by taking 3 deep breaths followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Breaths are expansive by nature. Stillness and silence are expansive because they are the opposite of action and sound, noise, words, thoughts. So we're going to move ourselves immediately into a more expanded state through the use of breath, stillness, and silence. And I always say, if you take nothing else from these sessions, just remember the value of breath, stillness, and silence. Here we go. 3 deep breaths. 15 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, and it's important that you not move a muscle so that you can distinguish the difference between absolute stillness and motion. 15 seconds. Deep breath. See, if you were to pay attention during the day, you'd see that you're almost constantly in motion on some level. Even when you're sitting, you're moving, you're turning. So when you put yourself in a state of absolute stillness, you're suddenly aware of how much you've been moving, how much you've been acting. Action is contraction. Stillness is expansion. We're doing nothing. And the same with silence. When you're absolutely silent, you stop thinking, you stop speaking. Now, you may have thoughts still running through your head, but that's habitual. We have a contractive habit. We tend to contract out of habit. So we're learning a new habit, that being expansion. So we're going to now do 5 deep breaths. We're going to take this further into a even more deeply expanded state. 5 deep breaths, followed by 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. 5 deep breaths. Breaths are expansive, so breathe as deep as you can. Now, a full 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. So again, you're moving on a continuum. If in life we tend to contract, to do, to think, to worry, we're moving ourselves in the opposite direction. Non-thinking, non-doing, nothing, zero, emptiness. So that's all we're doing. So each one of these steps is intended to move you incrementally into a more expanded state. And I've emphasized the word incrementally because there's a tendency when we practice this technique, and that includes me, and I've been doing this for years, to devalue the small amounts of relaxation, of expansion. Don't. Any amount of expansion has value. Why? Because you can't contract and expand at the same time. You can't make a fist and release a fist at the same time. It can't be done. You can vacillate between the two very rapidly. You could be generally contracting but occasionally move to expansion, but you can't do both at the same time. So any amount of expansion is useful. Any amount of expansion stops you from contracting. Now, there's nothing wrong with contraction. It's how we get things done. But if we are in an overly contracted state, which we tend to be, especially these days, any amount of expansion is of value. So it's important you recognize that, because there's a tendency to get frustrated. I get very frustrated with this technique because I'll be doing it. I'm thinking nothing's happening. I'm not feeling it. I'm still tense. I'm still worried. And yet, if you keep at it, keep knocking at that door, you will incrementally move yourself into a more expanded state. The longer you stay with it, the more deeply you will go until your body will and mind will relent and allow you to go into that expanded state. We're creating a new habit, an expansive habit. We have a lot of contractive habits, worry, thinking, obsessing. These are habits we go to comfort ourselves, to reassure ourselves, to calm ourselves. We're not used to letting go as a form of being. So it's a new habit. So it may take a while, but practice. Now we're going to do this again. We're going to take 5 deep breaths, followed by a full minute, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. And pay attention to the changes you may feel, especially after you've had the silence, because you may find yourself suddenly aware that you're more still, you're more calm, you're not thinking as much, because we've started to move ourselves into a more expanded state. So 5 deep breaths. I'm sorry, we just did 5. 7 deep breaths, followed by a full minute, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. 7 deep breaths. 3 more. 60 seconds, full 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. And just sit for a moment and register whatever changes you may be experiencing. You know, it's strange. Life is challenging, but one of the most challenging things in the world is to do nothing sometimes, to sit in absolute silence and stillness. Now, why? Why? Because we have created habits in our life, habits of behavior. And these habits are things like looking at our phone, watching the news, reading the newspaper, worry, any number of things we do which we've become familiar with as means to comfort and calm ourselves. So these are valid to a degree, but you may find that you see an incredible advantage to creating this new habit of expansion. So I talk a lot about contraction and expansion. And again, I like to mention these ideas come from a man named Thaddeus Golas, who wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, where he says everything in the universe is either in a state of contraction, squeeze your hands together, or expansion. So you begin to look at your life when you look at it through this filter of scanning with that in mind and say, at any given moment, am I contracting or expanding? And that's not to put a judgment on either of them. It's to say, pay attention and see where you're at. And if you are overly contracted, you may feel unhappy. You may feel bad. You might want to bring yourself back to center by expanding. And one of the ways to do that is scanning. So we started the session by saying scanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. So we're using the muscles. What we just did is the preliminary, I guess you could call the warm-up of scanning. We just got ourselves into a slightly more expanded state. But the actual technique is based on the incremental release of muscular tension. Incremental release of muscular tension. The muscles can either do one or two things. They're the perfect metaphor for this technique, contract or expand. You can't make a fist and relax the fist at the same time. You have to make a decision. Am I contracting or am I expanding? So you start to become aware of when you're contracted. And we use the muscles, the relaxation, the incremental release of tension to bring us into a more expanded state. We say to our muscles, relax. And to do that, they have to expand. So as you move through the body and begin to expand more and more, we're going to move through these muscle groups and let go, let go, let go. You begin to move yourself, your very being, into a more expanded state. We use the muscles as a guide. And people say, well, I want to think about something that'll make me feel more relaxed or happy. Well, that's all fine. If you have something that works for you, that's great. If you have a mantra of some sort or some sort of mental process, some verbal process, some book you read or something, that's great. But my idea, as I might suggest to you, is that thinking is a contracted process, the bringing together of words and ideas. So scanning is designed to not think. You want to go to a place of an empty mind. You want to stop contracting your thoughts. You want to let go of thoughts. So this technique is a strictly physical technique. You'll never read a book on this technique. You'll never hear a lecture on this technique other than these sessions which I run. And I almost wish I could do them without speaking, because what I'm doing is creating a contraction, an idea, a theory, a sentence. But what we want to do is go to a place of nothingness. But if you realize that, then you find that going to a state of nothingness and emptiness, instead of using a contracted process, thought, to get yourself out of trouble, as it were, to make yourself feel better, we let go of thought. And you will struggle with this, as I do, because you have a habit of thinking. We like to think our way out of problems. We like to obsess. Think, 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 think. When you expand, when you use scanning, as I said, the mind is a muscle of sorts. It relaxes and lets go, and these thoughts go away, and you find true peace through emptiness and nothingness. So we're going to use the muscles to guide us. We're going to start with these muscle groups, I call them, these muscle zones, muscular zones. And we're going to incrementally release muscular tension. So we start with the face. It's the most obvious. You can look in the mirror and see the change. On my count, you're going to release all the tension in your face. And we're going to distinguish between your face being in a contracted state and an expanded release state. We're going to repeat that throughout the body. We're going to cycle through and keep doing it. Now, I'm moving through all of these in a half an hour, so I'm going quicker than I normally would. You'll want to take as much time as you can. The face, on my count, let go. 3, 2, 1, and release. So I just moved myself into a slightly more expanded state by releasing muscular tension. I also was silent for a moment. Silence is always expansive. As I do these sessions, I start to take longer and longer periods of silence because I'm moving into a more expanded state, and I feel comfortable with that. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, look in the mirror. See the change. 3, 2, 1, and release. This is the heart and soul of scanning. That sense of that sense of that sense of squeeze and release. That's scanning. That is scanning. And we say scanning because we're scanning our body. We're going through our body and incrementally releasing these pockets of tension. We tend to carry a certain level of tension everywhere we go, even when we're sleeping. You'd be amazed. So we're training ourselves to let go of unnecessary tension. We hold on because it makes us feel secure and safe. Letting go feels dangerous, like a loss of control. So we habitually stay in a slightly contracted state, sometimes very contracted state. But even when we're sitting doing nothing, we feel as though we're relaxing, but sometimes we're holding a lot of tension. So we're going to create a new habit of letting go of that. The face, 3, 2, 1, and let it go. Pay attention to that feeling of, that's scanning. Top of the head is zone 2, 3, 2, 1, and release. You may feel your brow relax. You may feel as though someone just broke an egg on the top of your head and it's drooping down. You'll get more and more familiar with that feeling of muscular release. top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Now you've done the face, the top of the head. Move to zone 3, the back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, 3, 2, 1, the back of the head, and release. Pay attention to that change, that slight shift. The word incremental is crucial here because it might be very slight, but if you can begin to distinguish that sense of from this to this, you've headed down the path towards expansion. And it will ultimately take over your entire body, and you will completely let go and be completely at peace, relaxed, still, calm, with a clear mind. And then hopefully a place of peace, an island of peace in this world of madness. Zone 4 is the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. You're building a consciousness of your own state of being. And we don't frequently pay attention, sometimes because it's scary. But we tend not to really pay attention to what's going on because it can be frightening to let go of our guard. But you're building an awareness that you can do that you have the capacity to do that. You can change your state of being without having a drink or smoking a joint or any other number of what I call chemical expansions, which chemically force you to expand. You can do it naturally without any of the side effects of chemical expansion. Your body doesn't want chemicals in it. It wants to just be. And if you can find a way there without those, you will ultimately feel more in control, more of a master of your own existence. Zone 4, the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 5 is the shoulders, let them drop ever so slightly. Just feel the difference. 3, 2, 1, and release. There's a technique which I remember studying at one point when I was in acting school. And because actors, anybody basically will perform whatever they do better when they're relaxed. To be in a relaxed state is to be in an available state. Your full potential is available when you're relaxed. There's nothing hindering you. Your tension is not hindering you. You're available. So we used to think where we tense. We tense the face and then release, or tense the shoulders and then release. The main purpose being to feel the difference. Well, I don't think you need to, contract to expand. Just expand. So I skip the tense part. But it's a little trickier because you're trying to discover a sense of expansion that's very subtle. You're studying your body and you're seeing, how can I shift from a slightly contracted state, which I'm in now, to a more relaxed state? Well, try it. The shoulders, let them drop ever so slightly. 3, 2, 1, and release. And just start to become aware of where you're holding your tension. Again, we do this subconsciously. And then at the end of the day, we're exhausted. We don't know why, because we've been building up this contraction. It takes energy to contract. Your muscles can't contract without exerting energy, utilizing energy. So it's exhausting. That's another great benefit of being relaxed, is you have a lot more energy. You're not hindered by your own contractions. It's like trying to walk around in a suit of armor is a lot harder than just being free and moving freely. So we're trying to dissolve that suit of armor we wear, which in this case is muscular armor. Zone 5 is the shoulders. One more time. 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 6 is the chest, stomach, front of the waist. I call it the plate of armor, another protective area. See if you can sense that area. And on my count, release tension there. 3, 2, 1, and release. So now you're starting to get familiar with that feeling of release, expansion. The incremental release of muscular tension is expansion. Zone 6, zone 7 is down the back and into the pelvis and waist. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, down the back into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. And one more time, down the back and into the pelvis, the groin area, the waist. 3, 2, 1, and release. Again, you're like an investigator. You're going through your body and just searching for pockets of tension and releasing them. So you're becoming a master of your own being. It's a wonderful feeling when you discover that you can actually control your state of being. You don't have to panic. You don't have to rush to something that's going to fix you. You can actually calm yourself. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have a very active mind. In the middle of the night, my mind races 1,000,000 miles an hour, thinking about different things. And when I start to scan, which is what I do to solve that problem, to get myself back to sleep, it's a war. because my habitual mind wants to keep contracting. It's where it goes out of habit to solve whatever problems I happen to be thinking about. But I'm training myself through scanning to say, well, that's one way to go. Here's another. Why not try this? Well, that feels wrong. How can I let go? How can I stop thinking? That won't fix anything. You have to take the chance. Take the chance that letting go of thought, letting go of muscular tension will have as great a benefit or greater than focusing or thinking about that problem. And it ultimately does. Because you take yourself to a place of calm and openness and peace where you suddenly realize, I don't need to be thinking about that right now. I'll think about it tomorrow. It's going to be fine. I have time. You've created time. You've created space. And the solutions will come to you, not because you're fighting for them, but because you've made yourself available to them. But it's a hard habit to create. Because I said, in my case, I'm 67 years old. I have a lifetime of thinking and worrying and doing. So it's taken me many, many years to understand that this new habit, even if it feels strange at times or futile, works. You just have to stay with it. But you'll be at war with yourself sometimes. Sometimes you will actually be at war with your own habits in trying to create this new habit. But if you practice, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to practice. You're retraining your very body, your very being, to think a different way, to be a different way. It will pay off. So we've done zone 7, which is the groin, waist area, the pelvis. Now we're going to go down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. Focus on your feet for a moment, and on my count, release the smallest amount of tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the feet, 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. So we've covered all 8 zones. The face, the top of the head, the back of the head. We're kind of like doing a scoop. The neck, down into the shoulders, chest, stomach, waist, down the back and into the pelvis, across the knees and into the feet. Now what you're going to do if you have a scanning session is you're going to want to repeat that. You're just going to do that, go through it again. You may find it very challenging. You might find it frustrating. You might not feel a change for 5, 10, even 15 minutes. Keep at it. Know that you are at war with yourself, but that you can win. The body eventually will respond. It will finally get the message that we're taking this all a different way. We're going to let go. And you will be at peace and calm. You know, it's hard to imagine in life that doing nothing can achieve something. Achieve means to do, correct? In some cases, yes. I am a very contracted person. I work hard. I think. I do. I find great satisfaction and success in doing that. But again, it has its limits, and it can bring you into an overly contracted state. When you begin to think that the solution to everything is contraction, you become almost imploded. If you to take a being and start to contract and contract and contract and contract, what happens? Eventually, it becomes impacted. It becomes a solid, hard object, immovable, inflexible, impermeable. And then you lose all capacity to act or do because you're limited by your own contraction. I always say that 2 contracted beings slam up against each other, but 2 expanded beings can merge and join. So as you begin to expand, you open yourself up to all the possibilities around you. Again, neither is completely right or wrong. In life, contraction is what we do. It's how we make our lives happen, how we succeed and build things and create things and make money and have careers and relationships and build skyscrapers. It's how we do things. It's the stuff of life. If you're going to live on this earth, you want to be very good at contraction, at conducting a symphony, at, as I said, driving a race car. I mean, that's contraction. It's incredibly valuable. It's how we define ourselves. But the opposite is of equal value. Letting go, being nothing, being open, being available, being permeable. Now, it seems counterintuitive. How can you be both? But that's the balance. You do want both. You want to be everything and you want to be nothing. And the reason it's so hard to create this new habit is that in many levels it doesn't make sense. I will tell you that the best things in my life have been things that on some level didn't make sense. So trust that letting go and not necessarily having a rational grip on things can be very, very rewarding. And that's this new habit you're trying to create through scanning. Getting as good at expanding as you are at contracting. I would say my favorite expression in the world is I don't know. When someone says to me, we're talking about some topic and they say, I don't know, I just instantly love that person. Because what they're admitting is that that's a value. Not knowing is a value. How can you learn anything if you already know everything? When you say I don't know, you've expanded. I don't know. I have no definition. I haven't figured that out, which means I'm ready and able and available to learn. I don't know. And you could say the contraction is knowing and expansion is not knowing. You'll begin to look at your life through this lens of expansion, contraction, and you'll see where things fit in. As I just said, how knowing is contractive, how not knowing is expansive. And you'll see they both have value. They're just different forms, placements in the universe. And as I said, if you believe Thaddeus Goldlist, which I do, I really do, best book I've ever read in terms of explaining the universe, then that's the universe. It's both. And what we've done is created habits of contraction, and through scanning, we're creating new habits of expansion. And we're beginning to understand that it's of equal importance to learn how to let go, to be nothing, to be empty, to be undefined and available, as it is to know everything, to be defined, to say, this is what I am, this is what I do. Both have value. Both have value, but what you want is balance. And because we tend to move into a more contractive state in our lives, because we're trying to succeed, we've been taught, we have the habits of contraction, we've forgotten in many cases how to expand. And so if we can learn how to expand and be as good at expanding as we are at contracting, we can achieve balance in our life and be centered. And that's the goal. And I'm going to speculate here about something which I don't really know to be true, but I'm going to speculate. Thaddeus Goldlist wrote this book, The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. I'll just tell you this story and then we'll end the session. And it's a beautiful book. It's truly a guide. It's truly a guide. And it's a beautiful thing, and it was very successful. And he followed it up with another book. And in that book, he got very, very specific. He took what he had started and he began to define it down to this just very, very, you might say, very contracted ideas. He said, I want to improve on that book. And the book, in my opinion, was not very good and not very successful because he, I think on some level, decided that he wanted to grab a hold of this success and make it even better, which is what we all want to do. And apparently, from what I've heard, he passed a not very happy man. He was frustrated on some level, perhaps because he hadn't been able to achieve that ultimate goal of locking down his ideas. And I always think to myself, how tempting it is as a human being to want to lock things down, to finalize them, and to say, this is what is. And I think he succumbed to the very thing that he warned us against, and that is trying to define with finality what is. In his first book, he talked about how nothing is, everything is just vacillates between contraction and expansion. And he seemed to accept that. But as he moved into his older years, he wanted to lock it down to feel the success. And he became very unhappy as a result. So you have to be prepared to always let go. That's the key to happiness. Just being willing to let go, to open up, release, relax, and go back to your, what I call original self, a place of nothingness, where you had no name, you had no career, you had no set ideas about how the world works. You just were open and available as a being. That's peace, because that is accepting not what you think ought to be, but just what is. And ultimately, scanning wants to bring you to a place of just being. As I always say, hearing the sounds in the room, aware of your breath, feeling your heartbeat, having no ideas about what you want to do in the future or what you have done in the past, but just a state of being. You can't live there. You got to go out, you got to work, you got to do. but just to visit that place at least once or twice a day is very rewarding. So that's it for today's session. It's called Sqanning, Sqanning. It's the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. Practice, practice, practice. Incremental muscular release, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, an hour a day, whatever you can, but just build your awareness and this new habit and this new sense of the value of letting go, and you will have achieved center, peace, calm, and hopefully joy. I end every session with the same rule. Rule number 1, love yourself. Thaddeus Gola says love is the most expansive act you can take in the universe because it involves letting go, opening up, and embracing what is, starting with yourself. This is what you were given. Start here. And when you have so much love for yourself that there's extra and it's spilling out, pass it around to everyone around you, because I guarantee you they will appreciate it. I'm going to post this on my Facebook page for a while, then I move it over to the Sqanning Facebook page, Sqanning, where you can see other sessions. But in the meantime, thanks for visiting with me. Have yourself a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.